let's get started.
Hey, everybody, welcome to the Sex Actually podcast. Your host, Dave Neal, with Tasha Courtney and
Hello.
Robert Kandell. How are you, man?
Good to be here. Thank you.
Now,
Thank you so much for
I
being
heard
here.
about you from doing a stand-up show, and I was doing some jokes about my relationships and this and that, and I was talking to an audience member afterwards, and she recommended you, and I looked you right up, and then I got in contact with your people.
Nice.
So that was my roundabout kind of way that you're here right now, but thanks for coming.
I think it's the first time I've been pitched at a comedy show.
I know.
Might be the first time.
That's good, though.
Yeah.
That means you got, you got
People
it
are
going
talking.
on.
People are going
Fans
around.
all
yes.
over.
And it was like a small living room show too. It was like this very intimate show, and I don't even know who the audience member was. It wasn't a friend of mine. It was like a random person, and they said they took your seminar, I believe, or you had like a weekend seminar.
I was teaching a communication course in September.
That must have been it.
That must have been it.
Yeah. So your sort of expertise would be communicating in relationships.
Yes.
But also, like I saw your one sheet more like
In the men's space, more so.
I get around when
Okay.
it comes down to it. So I ran an organization called One Taste for about 10 years, and we taught about relationships, intimacy, communication, and sexuality. And during that time, I was the COO. I ran the men's program. I was a teacher. I was a coach. So there's a vast spectrum of things we can chat about.
Cool.
Well, I have a lot of questions. Here's the first thing, and
Okay.
we have about 80% of our guests are women. We really most of the guys that are on the podcast are just like comics who don't know how to get out of their own way.
Comedians, they have lots of funny stories because of all the
embarrassing
mistakes
stories.
that they're making.
Nice.
But also, we have a tendency to be worried about ourselves, and relationships are kind of on the back burner.
Okay.
So we don't really get too many expert male opinions, and we don't have much of a guidance out there.
Okay, I'm here to help.
Yeah,
here to
please.
serve.
So how did you first of all get involved? Like, how did you get your calling to do this?
I made a total fool of myself.
In just
Really?
over time, or any
No, in a
specific?
specific moment.
And what was that?
It was March 20th, 1999.
Wow.
I was going on my 29th birthday, San Francisco, California. I was taking a first workshop on sexuality with my first wife, Carol. In that moment, they said, introduce yourself. And I said, okay, my name is Robert, and this is my wife, Carol, and her name is Wolfie. Don't really like her name, so I call her by her nickname. And just went on for 3 or 4 minutes, and then thought that they would give me a standing ovation. The teacher would be like, come sit with me. But instead, the teacher, Erwan Devan, who's still teaching in San Francisco, said, hey, do you know your wife's crying? And she was sitting right next to me, even closer than you're sitting to me right now. And I had no awareness. All my attention was on myself. And she was crying. And what I saw in that moment, like the movie montage,
Flash
sped
before
fast,
your eyes.
exactly, click, 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 click. And I realized that I had no awareness around my chauvinism, my misogynistic nature, my lack of awareness. I was pretty much numb and dumb. So I had 2 options. Option number 1 was to stand up, take her, throw her over my shoulder, and go back to the cave. Number 2 was to stay in the burn and learn, and that's what I've been doing really for over 20 years now.
Yeah, because learning and growing and changing behaviors, recognizing harmful behaviors is very uncomfortable.
Yes.
That's all part of the process. It has to be uncomfortable, otherwise no one would ever change.
I love that you have the date too, the March 20th,
Yes.
1999.
Yeah, well, it's, you write books and you tell these stories over and over again. I've been telling the same damn story for 16 years or 17 years.
Do you celebrate the day, or is it just one of those things?
No one's ever asked me that. No. But I do still remember the sensation of it. I mean, it was close to 20 years ago, and I can still remember how uncomfortable it felt. Because then Erwan did the most awful thing possible. He stared at me. He's got these really intense eyes, and he stared at me and says, "Okay, who's next?" And then moved on. And I just sat there in the uncomfortable.
Oh, man.
Carol
You don't
turned
even
her
get any
attention.
closure.
No, I don't get coaching around it. He just let me burn in it, which was definitely the best thing for me and the worst thing.
Sure.
So that was my motivation.
But effective.
Now, in the almost 20 years since then,
Yes.
how far do you believe we've come as a gender, as guys that are searching for betterment? Is the conversation, has it improved, or is it guys hitting the same problems?
I think men are actually heading in the wrong direction.
Really?
Yes.
And why is that?
Ooh.
Yeah. Ooh.
So the reason is that women have been rising in power and status You just look at the midterms, 100 women in Congress, the most amount of women in the Senate and the House ever. The amount of CEOs in the Fortune 500, it's still in like less than 40 at this point, but still rising. And what's happening is the dynamic between men and women is changing significantly.
It used to be that women stayed home,
right.
Men made the money,
right.
We were meek and timid, We just did what we were told,
right.
And now we're bosses.
Right.
Now we make our own money. We don't have to submit to anybody.
Don't look at me.
No, but it's interesting because it has changed the dynamic. And though some people, I think there's lots of aspects to it, but it changes the power dynamic at home. It also changes the balance of responsibilities. I know a lot of women feel like they work all day, they come home, and then they have to manage the kids and manage the meals and manage the household. And they're like, where's my equal partner?
My question is this. Even bringing up that men sort of, I'm not saying are left behind, but have issues that need to be worked on. Even saying that sounds like a men's rights activist, and people go, oh, great. But here you are as a guy, knowledgeable, saying that we have a problem.
But there's been a pushback, right? Is that why you think that it's going in the wrong direction?
About 4 questions in there. So
sorry.
No worries.
Lots to unpack. We just
team.
Shout at you
exactly.
all at once.
Yes, no, 4, 7, 27.
We'll bill you after.
So let me pull the lens back and change it would be a complete answer, hopefully. Sure. So you have to understand the patriarchy's been around since around 4000 BCE. So the patriarchy's been around for 6,000 years. Women's suffrage was 1848, so 170 years ago. Women's right to vote, 1920, 19th Amendment, 100 years ago. And so really, women have been in this shift for less than 100 years when it comes down to it.
But women couldn't even have their own credit cards or bank accounts or get a loan until the 70s, late 60s, early 70s. So really, I mean, the speed at which things are changing is a little bit drastic for y'all, for you guys.
Exactly. And that's, that's the last part of it is in the 60s and 70s, society started to be like, hey, we need to create education and social programs for women and young girls to rise. And they did that, but they did not create the complementary programs for boys. And so what's happened in the mere last 50 years, so you have to remember 6,000 years of really one way and really in our psyches, in our bodies, in our souls, really to the Mad Men era, the 1950s and 60s, really it's been only 50 years since the change. And what happened is with this epic change, women have risen up and men have pretty much stayed the same. And when we say they're heading the wrong direction, instead of rising up, being like, okay, we've got a great mountain to climb, we've got a great new video game to play, they're basically giving up and playing video games, watching porns, hanging out with their bros, and really heading in the wrong direction. So that's my main reason that I say men need to step up, but they're scared as hell, and they aren't given permission to speak how scared they are.
That's interesting. I feel like Tasha's response would be like, "Well, women haven't." Well, here's a lot of women say, "Well, women haven't been able to speak for thousands of years. It's your time to listen." And I think it's just has to be a conversation. And this is great.
Well, yeah, a conversation. That's the point. Is that both people need to be listening. Men and women need to be open and receptive to the other person's feelings. I would argue that exactly what Dave said. Men have been the only ones that have been allowed to talk for 6,000 years, and we've been the ones quiet. And so we want to have our moment and we want to be heard. But I get what you're saying. It can be frustrating to feel like everyone around you is being helped up, and here you are stuck by yourself, all alone, out on an island, having to pull yourself up by your bootstraps. It's daunting.
It sounds, whenever I explain my own hardships to what I'm going through without having a community, it sounds pathetic when people, they roll their eyes very hard when I go, look, there's plenty of perks to being a straight white dude, right? But there's also by being clumped in with the masses, the higher percentage of our country is straight white guys, right? By being clumped in with them, there's no one cheering me on. There's people cheering you on as a woman. There's people cheering them. And I understand that I've got this privilege, but that privilege is all of us have this privilege. The straight white guys have this privilege. But me personally, I do understand how men could just feel completely lost. Do you know what I mean?
You have to think about what people mean when they're saying privilege. They're not saying that you also don't have challenges. They're saying that you don't have the challenge of being born a woman or the challenge of being born black as extra barriers to the normal everyday challenges. That's what they're saying.
Right. Now, what do you suggest is done of all this to, like, for men? Do you suggest just more education or?
Well, there's a few things. To your point about time for women to speak, I wrote this article right around Me Too that was talked about what lies beneath men's privilege. And I said fear and desire. And I gave a very, well thought out, well edited, really like major piece. I spent a lot of hours, got, a professional woman editor to come in behind me, and I published it, and I got flamed. Flamed by women. And I was just like, I'm on your side. I'm explaining things. And fire.
Hateful emails in your inbox.
And then I was like, then I started to look and I started to understand. I was like, it's not time for me to talk about men. Women need time
They need their moment.
Their time to off-gas those 6,000 years of being
pent-up
squeezed.
anger.
Pent-up anger. So, really what needs to happen, multiple things. On one side is men, like you said, just need to listen. They need to have presence. They need to have space. They need to understand the impact, because most men don't, the impact this has had on women for generations and generations and generations and generations.
Yeah, they're missing the empathy. They haven't really bothered to put themselves, even if they've tried, it's hard for someone who doesn't live this experience every day to truly understand what it's like to live in my shoes, in my clothes, and have my experience.
Right. Yeah, there's a book Tucker Max wrote, and he describes what it's like for women to go to a bar. And I used part of it in my upcoming book. And he said, okay, imagine this. You're at a bar. It's a Saturday night. You're really excited. And you're just a normal guy, 5'7", and all of a sudden you're surrounded by big football, burly gay guys around. And they're just tossing you around and having drinks and touching you when you don't want to be touched and hitting on you and not really listening to your feedback. It's like that's how a woman feels every single day of their lives. And I was like, God, it's horribly well written.
Imagine someone twice your size. I actually just read something very similar last night. I actually reread it. I had read it many years ago, but a girlfriend of mine reposted this article that was on Facebook. And she was talking about just like her experience walking her dog in her neighborhood and how men don't realize that they come across as threatening. Or more so, I guess it was saying, this is why women are rude to you on the street, right? When you approach a woman, this is why they're rude to you, because they have to be rude to you for their own safety.
Right.
Because you are double their size. She's in her neighborhood. You know where she lives. You're asking her about blah, blah, blah. She's walking her dog. She can't get away. And that's the truth of it, is that men don't understand what it's like to know that you could be physically overpowered by 50% of the population at any time.
Now, this sort of success and uprising that women are having, is it changing what they're looking for in a guy? Are you noticing any trends with that?
Definitely. And there's so many great books. I could go over just speak about the books I've read. But so when you look at women now have choice, to your point before about credit cards, they never had the economic freedom for choice. So marriage on some level, there was love and romance, which is actually relatively new in our grand scheme of things. But for women until the 60s and 70s and 80s was an economic decision.
Security.
If I want a house, I need to have a man to help me buy the house. Now, in today's generation, we live in a time, so in the 1970s, women...
By the way, the feminists are coming to get you. That's what that sound is right now.
No, I'm behind you. I'm on their team. I'm working for you guys.
I'm with you. I'm with you. I'm sorry.
That's all right. 1980, women made 60 cents to every man's dollar. Now, millennial women in 2012 entering the workforce is now 93 cents to every man's dollar.
White women.
Millennial white women. Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. Black women and Hispanic women earn less.
Right. So 93 cents for millennial women entering the workforce. So now women have choice. And you see it, that they're even deciding not to get married. The time when men and women are getting married used to be like 21, 22 in the 1970s is now like 29 and 30. People are not getting married. They're having
Not
kids.
having children.
And they're deciding, do I want the economic reality of being in partnership with this man when some of them are making more money than men in the same jobs? So what's happening is that there's a shift. This is not equal. I'm not saying we're equal at all. I'm just saying there's a
because
major
still
shift.
we are so far from equality. That's the thing that
Right.
I like to remind men is like, you guys are acting so threatened, but we're not even the majority now. Like, we're not the majority of Congress. We're not the majority, we're not the majority of CEOs. We're just barely getting close.
But we're
creeping up.
You're threatening
the status quo.
They're threatening their viewpoints of what women should be. There's a book called Angry White Man by Michael Kimmel, who's an incredible writer. And this book talks about aggrieved entitlement. And that's what angry white men have, is that they have a belief that they should have the job. They should have the relationship.
They should be earning more money.
Right. These women are taking my job just because they've had 6,000 years of believing it's their job. So we're talking about the threat is the threat of the image of what it means to be a man. And men are more confused now than ever.
About what it means to be a man.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, the balance has all changed.
I
so it's just got to like sort of, I mean, do you think it's going to level out? Like, Tasha, do you think, I mean, it's like the balance is just different. Is it going to find its footing?
Well, if we can step back a minute, I want to go back to your first question, which was, do you find that it's changing what people are looking for in a relationship, what people are looking for in men? And you said, you started talking about economic freedom. But I think also women, not just, not just that they have the power of dollars in their pocket. I think also they really want an equal partner. And so I'm finding with my friends that a lot of women are not willing to put up with somebody who isn't willing to pick up after themselves, who isn't willing to cook, who isn't willing to clean the house. They want someone who is truly a collaborative partner.
Yeah, because you've got that buying power.
Yeah.
You have the buying power to just say, fuck you. I mean, even like if you take our relationship, I moved into Tasha's place. So like you've got the upper hand where you can just be like, be gone, be out of here.
So I guess you clean a lot.
I actually cook a lot.
I have to micromanage the cleaning so hard.
Yeah.
Listen, I cook a lot. And if you've tasted any of Tasha's food, you'd offer to cook too. You'd be like, let me get that for you. Unless you want, I always make fun of her. She burnt corn. Like, how do you burn corn? That's not even
I have the buying power for takeout.
There we go.
Now, because if there's any positive, I would like to think that the longer people wait to get into marriages, the better success chance they have. Do you think that's the case where people are avoiding that early mistake now, and how do you view your first marriage? Was it a mistake? Was it rushed upon, or was it just a learning experience?
Divorce rates have been about equal. We do have more single adults in America for the first time, 50.2% for the first time in the history of more single adults. So we are seeing a change. I actually teach people that no relationship is a mistake. It is a learning. So my first wife, Carol, and I met when I was 24. She was 26. We got married. We moved to San Francisco. We just followed the path, the rules. You date, you move somewhere, you move in together, you get married, and you produce grandchildren. And, not children, you produce grandchildren. That was the rule.
It's really about making mom and dad happy. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so we were together for 7 years. She is, up there with second or third woman that's had the largest impact of me in my entire life. Really took me by the hand down the rabbit hole to who I am today. I'm so grateful. And at the end, really what had us was our life choice of how we wanted to live. I wanted to go and build one taste. She didn't feel comfortable with that, and so we split. And a lot of other drama included in that. But the point was, it was a lifestyle choice. And I'm so grateful for that relationship. And so there's no failure in any aspect of it.
We've discussed pretty candidly our relationship on the podcast and also privately with like why we're still together, what we have. And we still communication issues. I mean, it's like where it's really like two different languages we speak sometimes. But in the end, I think we share the same sort of vision for what we want in the future, which is like maybe a family, but we're both sort of like, meh, you know what I mean? Like it's not like I've got friends who's like my buddy Gooch, right? His girlfriend like wants to be married and kids like stat like yesterday, like ready to go, and he's like being all right, but it's like, bro, do you want that or not, man? Like, you know what I mean? Like, there's conversations that need to be had there, and I think we're like, well, we got the dog, we're good, and then but and then we have to also, the reality is in the future, like if Tasha decides, if you decide you want something completely different out of life, like it's just like how women have evolved, in gender roles, relationships either, I guess, stay magnetized or not. I mean, would you agree that like we have to either decide that you're going to stick together through it all, or?
Well, I think it really comes down to priorities. You mentioned that with your first wife, Carol, when you wanted to launch one taste, she really just wasn't comfortable with that. We make the choice every day to put each other first, to put our relationship first, to love each other. We choose to make this relationship work every day throughout our problems. And that's, I've never had that in any other relationship where I really chose to make it work. But it doesn't change the fact that if we had truly different priorities, or for lifestyle, for jobs, for kids, for our 5, 10, 15-year goals, I don't know that that's something that you could overcome just by wanting to. I mean, you really have to have your priorities aligned if you want to stay together for the long term. And
that's almost why you see like celebrity couples. And I know that's probably not the norm, but they'll get success at different times and they end up breaking up or whatever it is. And it's like, how do you, it's hard to grow together, not necessarily like be the same people, but at least side by side. Like, do you find with your wife now, are you both at a place where you feel like you've matured to the same level, or are you both still growing together? Like, how would you say it's different than, say, your previous relationships?
Well, I'm different, first and foremost.
You've done the work at this point.
A lot of work. And, I was very good at attracting smart, powerful, attractive, mean women. I was like a professional at women who were not nice. Like, they're, and that was something I picked. Wasn't deserving, and so I just picked women that were kind of mean. And then Morgan is the first truly nice woman in my entire life I've dated.
Wow.
Like, to the core nice. And it is like magical. I'm just like, oh my God, this is what it's like to be with someone who's actually nice. And so that's the first thing. The second thing is that we both believe in the evolution of ourselves. And this is what a lot of couples get stuck on. They believe that we get married or we get engaged, we get connected, and that means that we're going to set limits of how much you can evolve. We're going to create a little box, and you're not allowed to grow outside that box. But the truth is that we want our partners to evolve, and then we're scared shitless basically to do it. So it's the juxtaposition between the two. The agreement I have with Morgan is let's grow. Let's be for each other's growth. Let's do all the work. And she is the most curious woman I've ever been with, like just eating stuff up, like, and totally different stuff that I'm into. The point is that we're both in our growth, and then we grow together. Now, it leads to conflict and charge and communication breakdowns. We just had one last night. That was a knockdown, breakdown fight. I fucked up, and she called me on it. And so we are, we're in the middle of it. But the point is like, I would rather live a life of large expansion with mistakes than staying in a status quo box. That would be killer.
The safe and...
I love looking at it that way. Because, I would hope that that's where we're both looking at. We're trying to grow our careers, are kind of just like, I've always, it's kind of biblical, but the saying I've always said since like, I think I was like an early teen, was enlarge my territory. And just that idea where you're asking for like growth and like be bigger, just subscribe to the podcast, rate it, review, share with your friends, that type of thing. But like really just becoming more and knowing that your partner is going to be okay with that. And it's like, so when you guys argue, do you have set rules? Do you have set sort of boundaries where you can get it out quicker so it doesn't linger, or is it always a different scenario?
It's always very different. And we call them heated discussions, though they're really arguments at times, but heated discussions. And it really is just, the difference between Morgan and I and any other relationship is that we're very quick to take responsibility for our actions.
And mistakes, including mistakes.
And so we'll be blah, 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 and she'll be like this. I'm like, wait a minute, you're right. I did do that. I can see that hurt your feelings. I went
Quick
too
to
fast.
apologize.
Quick to apologize. Quick to own things. Quick to look how we've co-created it, how we've manifested this. Looking at our childhood wounds, and there's an NLP. It's called outsourcing. When I have an issue inside of me, and then I outsource it on Morgan to create it, so I'll have the experience. And so we're very knowledgeable about our own internal work that enables these conversations to go quicker, to be more passionate and more heated, but also the most responsible I've ever seen. And I think in terms of communication, we often argue to be right rather than connected. We often argue in terms of antagonistic, I want to beat you, rather than the concept of collaborative. And so if you can switch to a collaborative form of communication, then there's so much more intimacy and things go so much faster.
Yeah, I've always thought, at least, my actions might not agree, but that the quicker you get, that the person who wins the fight is the person who gets the fight over with faster. So if it means apologizing or doing whatever, it's like as soon as the fight's over, I've had friends that go like, dude, like I couldn't do a relationship just, that you find out it's because they have to be right all the time. And that's what single guys are right.
Yeah. And alone.
That is sort of, that attitude, I think, has really permeated other aspects of our culture as well. You find that in politics, people just shouting each other online, just trying to make their own viewpoint heard, just trying to push their own views onto everyone else instead of being active listeners, instead of being empathetic, just like we talked about before.
Yeah. Do you think social media has sort of cemented the way we kind of fight, as far as like in a like I'm right and I have to prove myself,
made it a habit
way, or like is social media just reflecting who we are, or do you think it's creating these bad tools? Because relationships, just either I don't see relationships thrive on social media, but I see social media kill relationships.
I think it's the best of the best and the worst of the worst. I think there's some incredible things that come out of social media and education. I have access to thousands and thousands of people's different viewpoints and articles and ideas and concepts. And so I think it's, one of the most amazing things. And I think it brings out some of our worst habits. And, I'm very interested in politics. I move towards Democrat. I do not like Trump, but I'm so intrigued by him at the same time of like, what does he represent in our culture? What is it that he's trying to show the rest of the world? I actually think it's beneficial that Trump was elected.
I said this to Tasha yesterday.
Because he's showing the world the angry white men and what needs to be seen that wasn't seen before.
Yeah,
and so
instead of staying hidden.
And it's because of him, and again, it's probably not his purpose, but it's because of him that there's like 100 new female judges, and it's because of him that people go, what the fuck have we been letting slide and getting, and and it's not what we wanted, but it might be what we needed. And I don't mean that in a pro-Trump way. I mean that in some sort of like, well, I think we're awakening some, and we said this in our car ride to San Francisco, where I was like, look, I mean, geez, it's really unearthing a lot of bullshit, and he's draining the swamp, and he's in it. And he's part, you know what I mean? I don't know. But
it's going to be one of those movies, with like the twist in the tail, the end when the denouement is coming in and everything makes sense why he's president. I have really faith it's going to be some epic movie like that.
I think if for some crazy thing these Miller reports come out, and I don't want to make this all political, but we just got there. I have this weird thing where I almost think you don't want him to be kicked out of office because it's going to rally the wrong response. Do you know what I mean? I feel like there's like, you talk about like this gassing out period. Is that the term you used?
Off-gassing.
Same thing.
But it's almost like that. It's almost like we need to let this burn off. Like
we just had a really good comment on our feed. Sarheed said, "You're basically saying you need rain for a rainbow."
Oh,
and
wow.
That's kind of the truth. I've never heard that one.
And our country's past due for that.
Fertilizer to, basically shit to raise the crops.
Yeah.
So
thank you, Trump.
I'm hoping.
No, you really just spoke to me when you said that, because that's how I feel. Where I was like, I'm leaning to the Democrat side, but these people that say, oh, we, and it's very common. I think even Tasha, you said, oh, we won the House. It's like, what does we mean? Like, we're all like, my parents are leaning on the other side, and they're good people, but like they're just a product of they're not sort of, their reading comprehension when it comes to social media and the internet is no bueno. So they're only getting the stuff that the algorithm has them getting. I read Fox News, CNN. I really try to like, oh, what's the other side going to say about this? I just think like, hopefully the younger generation, as we grow up, realizes how to like,
well, we're definitely a lot more discerning. We have a better understanding of what is like fake news and what is hyped news, and the difference between like a factual headline and like a TMZ headline. Well, but what I'm saying is the younger generation. So like our parents don't really get it or pay attention. I mean, mom's not even on Facebook. I just have to look at pictures. But like, you know, for those that are users who didn't really grow up in this era of having to know what's real and what's fake, we had to write our papers in school knowing what's like a legit article and not a legit article. So we have a little bit of a better ability to discern, I think.
Yeah, it's just, but yeah, anyway, to your point being that good things will come out of this, as you know, the women's movement. I mean, that it all grab you by the pussy. It's all like clumped together. It really is. I mean, Kavanaugh, like it's crazy shit, but it's like, you know, and the thought that, you know, there is the thought out there that people say they're scared for their boys, that they're going to be like falsely accused. I know Tasha's
one of our streamers said we're really failing our boys in those aspects we were talking about earlier by not giving them resources to understand. You know, you're right, they feel sort of entitled and they feel like they're missing out on things that they are entitled to, and we're not really giving them the tools to deal with an egalitarian society.
But if I went on Facebook right now and said we're failing our boys, the young men of our country is not being led in the right direction, I would go viral. It would be
in the wrong way.
I mean, Robert, I had posted something and it went down this crazy rabbit hole, and women started in a very select group of women started like screen grabbing what I posted and sharing it on their page, and it ended in a female sharing in explicit detail her rape story. And I'm like, we're not ready for these conversations
also,
if this is the response.
Why are you having this conversation on social media in 100 characters or less? That you can't just say we're failing our boys, period. If you're not going to be elaborating, if you're not going to be like providing sort of like context or backing it up with facts or anecdotes, then why even bother saying anything? That's the problem, is people just spouting these little one sentence opinions and then being unwilling to hear anyone else's point of view, being unwilling to back it up.
Well, you know what,
it should be part of a broad conversation.
You know what I heard, which I really liked online, was someone posted. It was actually in a feminist group on Reddit, which I actually like. I'm a part of. I'm a part of reading. I would consider myself a feminist, but like I understand I'm not wanted in a lot of conversations. And I get
it's not that you're not wanted.
No. But like I understand that there's conversations that just there for women. Women have the right, just like men have the right to have conversations amongst themselves. You know, like the point is that it said if women are mentioning their issues that they have, and a guy's response is to say, well, boys are being left behind, it's like that it's wrong to combat the women's issues with the men's. Like that's a separate issue.
That's taking the car off the rails.
Yeah.
That's you don't need to steer the conversation into something else right now. Like we're talking about the topic the topic at hand.
Right.
That's, that happens all the time, is that when people hear sending boys in the wrong direction, women are saying, what about the women? Or when women are saying, this is my rape story, oh yeah, but men are raped. And so I don't really know what that is. Do we need some sort of validation? My belief system is we're not really willing to feel the totality of the sensation around the communication. And so what we do is we minimize it, we dilute it by actually saying something to, I'm part of it too, or instead of holding the full feeling of the impact that the communication made.
You know, the one thing that and that's, again, I'm going to have to isolate that clip because that blows my mind. Smarter than anything I've ever said in my life. The one thing I love about podcasting is that it's very rare for a podcast to be sensationalized or go viral in a negative way. It's easy for a clip on SNL. It's easy for an article you wrote on Jezebel. It's easy
for that stuff to be taken out of context.
And I see it all the time, even with what Trump says in a lot of politics. It's like you don't always get the full story. You get whatever fits the agenda. And it's like, well, you might have said those 19 words in that order, but what did you do to say before and after it? And so many good men out there have tried to say the right thing, And boy, have they... I mean, if my stepdad, who's like a God-fearing, loving, like Catholic guy, like he's a very charitable man, but we were in the car with him once, and he was trying to write off Trump's comments about women, and it's like, dude, if you posted that online, you would, and if he was famous, he would have been fired from whatever his job would have been. But he's just an old man who thinks he's, you know what I mean? Like we're holding people all to the same level of wokeness. And I think we need to be sort of have this empathy, for people that just aren't there yet. Even though it's like we used to judge people if they meant well. Like, does that person mean well? Even if they're saying something like, if they're using the wrong term for females, or they're calling them girls, or it's like, how many times have I said, well, I know, like, even we have that question where we say girls and we go, oh shit, like that's not what we're supposed to say anymore. It's women or young ladies or whatever. It's like,
well, it is a slow process, and if you think about it, since the beginning of time, we've only gotten our moment in the last 1 second of 6,000 years. I mean, it is a slow process, and you've got to be patient. Not everyone is up to speed in the same way that you are. And
we came here to talk really about relationships, but it's hard not to bring the political in with it, because it's just where our time is right now.
I do have a couple more questions for you. Someone just posted, the fatherless generation is part of the problem, no proper role models. Do you have anything to say to that?
Definitely. Part of my book, I was researching male role models, and I had really kind of trouble finding it. There was, I found some websites and some pictures of them, but there really is a lack of role models. And like they said, we do live in a divorce age, especially in the times where young boys were growing up in women-run, and a lot of anger. I have one client who had a mom and 2 sisters after the father left, and guess who took the blunt of the father leaving? The young boy. And he was tortured mentally, not physically, mentally, because he was in that role. So the point is, like, yes, the dissolving of the family, and it's more than that, it's dissolving of community. 100 years ago, 110 at the turn of the century, we tend to live in clans. You lived with your relatives, and so if the family broke up, you had your cousins and your uncles to raise them. And now, with the advent of the suburbs in the 1940s, 1950s, and then the movement to the cities, we're actually living the most isolated now than ever before.
Yeah. I think they say that the ideal community size is like 20 to 100 people or something like that. And it's true. Like with globalism too, I know, my generation, lots of kids moved away. We all have to travel for the holidays because we don't live in the same cities as our families anymore. Right.
Yeah,
you don't have that support system when you want to start raising kids. I mean, that's probably another contributing factor to why people are putting off marriage and kids later and later, besides the economics of it all.
And we seek finding a tribe. We look for it online, and maybe it's just surface level, but we look for that community, whether it be just like following, like being in certain chat groups and things like that,
or joining a kickball league or going to church. Yeah, you do seek that out.
What's your recommendation for this generation who's looking for love, looking for but also community in a world where like we're all just kind of like follow unfollow like?
Well, it's really what you're saying, like find a kickball league, or for men looking to grow, I often recommend gender groups, finding other men to be in relationship with. Men don't have a lot of close friends. If you look at, there was an article that talked about older men are more afraid of dying alone than from emphysema or cancer. Like we just fear because there's this generation of being alone. And so finding other friends, maintaining friendships, creating friendships. And I'm a successful 48-year-old person with a wife, and I'm still struggling. So we went to an instant choir in Hollywood, where we sang Thriller right before Halloween. So,
oh my gosh, that's so cool!
It is so much fun. So it's really there are, and I know people in smaller towns is more difficult, but there's really no excuse not to accept laziness and our addiction to our phones, addiction to our screens. And I think one of the things I was thinking about is that parents are using screens as replacement parents. They're now the new babysitter, and kids, 1, 2, 3, 4 are staring at their screens rather than talking to adults.
They're slot machines.
We were
They're
just
slot
talking
machines.
about this also on our drive. I love driving. I love our long road trips because there's not a safer space in the world to have a conversation than in the car.
We were in the car 17 hours in the last since Saturday.
2 days.
48 hours. 17 out of 48 hours we've been driving together.
But we were saying exactly that I think that kids are not developing their creativity as much. Like when we were little, I never was bored because I always made up something to do. But kids these days do not know what to do. They don't know how to entertain themselves if they're not watching TV or on their iPad or on the phone. That's literally their only entertainment. They don't know how to like use their imagination, go outside. I'd be out back whittling, like just making up the stupidest
A refrigerator
stuff.
box became a spaceship. I mean, the whole Calvin and Hobbes thing. It was just really like we lived in our imaginations.
Yeah. And I wonder how that affects the economy growing forward. Like, does the United States, like, I don't know what the new thing that we need is going to be, but like, I don't know how you contribute to like a healthy economy by being a consumer of games or television. I don't know. It's interesting.
They'll find a way to sell it. Don't worry.
We have DFT, device-free time, because it's a super, I wouldn't call it a huge problem in our relationship.
Well, it's an addiction, 100%. It's an easy addiction. It becomes part of our like relaxation time.
But there's probably couples, and we're guilty of it on nights, but that just will both tuck themselves into bed, just turn away back to back from each other and go on their phones. And it's like, and again, and I last year, my New Year's resolution was to get the phone out of the bed. It's crept back. It's got these little legs. It walks back into the bed. And the whole, and it's the same, everyone's excuse. I use my phone. It's my alarm. It's like, well, but like Tasha, like you are a creative person. And wouldn't you say your phone stifles your creativity when you could be?
I would say it's a time suck more than anything else. It's a time suck. Just like you were saying, I think there are a ton of benefits to the internet, to having computers in our hands. Any sort of info we ever need, we can get within a second. But everything is gamified. This is gamified. Facebook is gamified. Instagram is gamified. And it's built specifically to be addictive, to keep users active all the time. And you've got to be aware that, like, you are not as strong as the game. You can get sucked in. All of a sudden, 4 hours have passed. What have you accomplished? Your whole night is gone.
I did background work on this TV show called Abby's. It's coming out on NBC, and the whole premise of the show, it's a live show, it's shot with a live audience, and it's shot outdoors. It's the only live show that's shot outdoors, and it's shot in this lady's backyard on the Universal lot, but they built it as Abby's backyard, and she creates a bar, and the only rules of the bar is that you can't have your cell phone out. So they have a book of encyclopedias. So when you have like those questions, you got to go to the encyclopedia and you got to like talk it out, and you have to like decide as a community the answer.
That used to be like a major investment back in the day. I remember my grandma had like a nice set of encyclopedias.
Encyclopedia Britannicas,
yeah,
leather bound. And
yes, they were red with like gold embossed.
Yeah, we had hand me downs, so we had like 3 letters missing. So, like, I never knew anything about W.
We're confusing this next generation. Encyclopedia? Is that encyclopedia.com?
It was like 3 rows of the bookshelf next to the fireplace.
We were pretty much relying on an oligarchy, a small group of Britannia people, to tell us what the truth was. Now it's like if your encyclopedia was just all thrown together with different people's opinions. So you could be like, oh, who, it's just, that's what the world is now. It's like we rely on this Wikipedia user generated thing, which might work 95% of the time, but the other 5% is just like, what the fuck?
Trolls sneaking in little funny
Tasha,
Easter eggs.
We had this argument because Tasha tried to tell me that it's faster to boil eggs with cold water.
No, here's what it is.
Than warm water.
It's that there is no difference whether you start boiling your water from cold or start boiling your water from hot. And the reason is, yes, it is true.
I hope people don't judge you based on this knowledge that I don't believe.
It is true. Something about like the time it takes once it gets to like a particular temperature, the time it takes to get from that to boiling is the same. So it doesn't matter.
And the reason we had this discussion because I would put the hot water on. I would put the hot water on and wait till it was.
Also, the hot water is just dirtier. Bacteria grows in the hot water tank, so you should always be using cold water to cook.
Well, but the point is that we were both able to Google our own point and be right, even though any scientist who's listening could probably be like, Dave's right. But yeah, do you find in your relationship that you've got to like call each other out, like, hey, you're sucked into your phone again? Do you find like any issues with that technology?
Only because we're really conscious about it. So I have a rule: if I'm in the bedroom and she's putting the kids to bed, and she comes in, I just put my phone down immediately. I actually take it and put it down. We don't sleep with the phones near the bed, so our first thing is interacting with each other, and so we really have set rules, and we do want to create device-free days because the kids they're 8 and 10 and they're already addicted and they're already angry when you try to take them away. Like furious, like stop doing cocaine or heroin, angry, rage in the young one. And it's like, oh my God. And so the fires were this weekend and we were evacuated from our house.
You were?
I'm sorry.
Oh my gosh, where are you staying?
We actually,
don't feel weird. I was just talking about the creepy guy on the street. That's like, where do you live?
Yeah, down there. So, we left the house and we grabbed the things we thought, and we forgot the older daughter's phone. And she was furious. She's like, my phone, my phone, my phone. And you could tell, like, she was more worried about the phone than she was us. So it was really interesting, like, to get really addicted to it very quickly.
You can't blame the addict. They're created by some of the smartest people in the world to hold your attention, to have this dopamine rush and to be like, whoa, I got a message, or whoa, like every time.
Yeah, the pings. It's like so Pavlovian. Every time, my phone is always on silent, always, always, always. It's never on loud. And but even just like at my job, someone else's phone goes off, and I'm like, is that mine?
Mm-hmm.
I just like I always have this response, like, oh, someone might need me.
I was riding a bike and something on the bike vibrated, and I thought my phone was going off. My phone isn't even. I haven't set my phone to vibrate in 7 years. And I still was like, what's going on? I just have this like the bat phone, it's I got one more or one or two more like questions that I want that
things that you want to touch on.
So back to my relationship with Tasha. And we're going on 5 years here. So we've I think we've come a long way. But I still have a hard time telling Tasha the truth about how I feel about certain. I have a hard time sharing my honest opinion, and I know that that's a topic that you've discussed before.
You have fear.
Fear, big time.
You have fear, and fear is not really accepted in men. We're taught to be stoic, disdain fear, and so you often have relationships to our fear, but then the fear moves into the shadow, and then it's a little man behind the curtain running Dave, basically, pulling the strings, and so that's one side of it. The second side is that we live in sort of antagonistic society, and so you've probably been trained not to trust women in certain areas for sure, but other areas, basically women are the enemy or to be avoided, and so we spend a lot of time staying inside the colored lines of what we think is acceptable for their approval, because on some level you probably believe from your entire life that she'll pull that approval, and from that approval comes the energy and the sex, and your livelihood depends on it. And so what you do is you create facades, you create boxes of what's true. Anytime you go outside of that, you activate your vigilance center, your fight or flight, and that's a scary thing for a guy because we're not taught how to interact with our fight or flight.
It's worse than any other argument with other people in my life.
Right.
It's worse. And I've put my foot down with my opinion on certain things. And I've also, I think sometimes Tasha, and I don't want to speak for you, but I've put my foot down on how I feel about certain issues or my decision on what to do about certain things. And I think you sometimes see it as a threat that I'm like leaving you. And it's led to like we've fought. Sometimes when I'll just like put my foot down on something, we've fought over nothing. And it's like, and it's not even like some big angry fight. It's like some philosophical like difference. And like take this for any, and this isn't a fight that we've had because I haven't told you this, but like, and this isn't a big deal. But we were talking on the phone earlier today, and I got scheduled for work tomorrow night. And you have this movie you wanted us to go see. And I was like, I don't even know how to tell you that I can't go to the movie.
So he's telling me now, with you here to be the mediator.
How do you feel about that?
I'll ask someone else. You know,
but you know what I mean. But I just found that out, and I asked to get my shift covered because I know I can like sort of try to get it covered. But I was also like, I don't want you to think I don't care about you.
Well, here's the thing: it's nothing to do with her. You know, this is your past, your damage, your baggage with women. This is probably a mom thing, right? Yeah. Because there's viewpoints out there that all trauma occurs between 0 and 8 from the womb, or ancestral, if you believe in that, but from 0 to 8. And then everything that happens in adult is a re-traumatization of something that happened for 0 to 8. So, for my example, was like I would love sweets as a kid. I grew up in the 70s. You know, like there was like Haagen-Dazs and Wonder Bread and cheese, and they had these things called Fudgetown cookies. And I love the Fudgetown cookies, and so I would just eat them nonstop. And Oreos, double stuffs. And my mom, who had some body issues, it stuck all her stuff, and so she took it out on me. And so what I learned was to be sneaky with my desire. Now at 48, I'm still sneaky with my desire, and I have more awareness around, but it still ekes out this traumatization. So my point is that you by you focusing on this is something between you and Tasha, is sort of like following the wrong trail. It's not the really root cause. It's so followed. So we can go back to it and say, the communication is, I feel afraid to say this to you. I have fear. I'm not sure what the fear is about, and say blah, 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 and then let her space for her to respond, and just be like, okay, babe, I'll go find someone else. It's not a big deal. What? This isn't a drop-down fight? No.
I know it's weird. Sometimes I've had, and you're right. And I was raised by a single mom until my stepdad came around when I was like 11. And I think, yeah, I mean, and when you look back, people go, "Oh, 11-year-old, you had your whole life to live and learn." But I was like, I really felt like I was me by way before he came along. He's a great guy, but I really felt like I was me. And I didn't have a bad relationship with my mom, but she was a saleswoman on the road, and yeah, like I've always been a guy who like loves my sweets, loves my, I don't know, like I've never been in a long-term relationship where I've had to be conscientious about someone else. So like if I let you down because I can't do something, I'd rather fuck my own plans. Like how many times I've fucked up my own plans, and then I'll end up like, say, canceling an open mic I was supposed to go to. And then I'll be with Tasha, but then I won't really be there with Tasha. Are you listening to me?
Yes, I'm absolutely listening. We're at the top of the feed, guys. We're at the top of the homepage because people are really digging our stream right now.
Nice.
Well, so I've always felt like I'll do what she wants me to do, but then have this resentment it built in.
Yeah.
And I really want to live. And again, you're probably the closest thing we've had to a guardian angel come by the podcast here. I do appreciate all that you've, telling us. And I'm always one who wants to be told like, no, Dave, this is your problem. I do believe it is my problem, but I also believe that Tasha can be hard to please. She set the bar very high for me.
But don't you think, to Robert's point, that your mom is also very hard to please?
Oh.
I mean, I'm really, truly, I believe. Thank you, guys. I believe that 100% you have a fear of letting people down, and it manifests itself in so many different ways. It manifests itself in our relationship. It manifests itself with your friends. It manifests itself in business. I think that that's probably a core issue. And sure, like we've had plenty of times where like he has come to me and said something and I've had not the best response. Yeah. I felt let down. I felt whatever, like I wasn't a priority. But
also
in general, we try to really listen and to be empathetic, to understand where each other are coming from.
Well, I'm excited to share my fear, to at least express like that I'm feeling afraid. And I hope you genuinely believe it, because like even saying it right now, it's like, fuck, man. Yeah. Like I really,
racing?
yeah. I mean, there are things like, yeah, it's no surprise I do stand-up comedy and want to please everyone I get to see and could talk to them, for hours just to like make a quick bond and then leave. Like that's my kind of junky thing
Here's the second recommendation, right? Don't make her your therapist. Don't make him your therapist. So I do a lot of my own work. I have my therapist. I have my friends. I have my own methodologies. And so I call it distilling. So if I come with some crazy thoughts, I can go to Morgan. I could say I'm having this crazy thoughts, and she can take on the responsibility, which she does a lot, of guiding me to my clarity. What's a more adult way to do it is to be like, okay, I'm going to distill this down to one thought. I'm going to do my work. I'm going to look at this. I'm going to play with it.
Before you bring it to the table. Before you bring this big shitstorm, this big mess of stuff.
So you know what you can present the issue to be, rather than just a ball of emotions. Is that what you're saying?
I'm not saying I have to do this all the time. There's times I bring it to, like last night, I brought it to Morgan kind of a raw thought, and neither of us were really in a great place to handle it. And so that led to a lot of the discord, was my lack of clarity. So in the optimal times, it's a very sharp, specific, whoa, I figured out this thing. This is what happened. Boom, boom, boom. And she's like, oh, then she can get curious. And then we're like looking at a cool video game or a cool art piece together. We're pulling it apart. So it's best to do your own work, distill it down to the most electric distilled version.
I like that.
We talk a lot about not bringing home our baggage or like our stress. A lot of times for me, it's work related. I'm always stressed out about work. I'm always being pulled 1,000 different directions. And so I try my best not to bring home all of that shit.
Yeah.
That I'll be so worked up, and it's the emotional aspect of it that's the hardest. But sometimes I just get on the phone with my sister. I shouldn't make my sister my therapist. I shouldn't make my friends my therapist, and I shouldn't make Dave my therapist.
Just have lots of Lots of friends. Then you can share
Give
the
them
love.
little
Share the
doses.
love.
When you got a problem and you're just like, who will answer next? You're going down the list when it's like your second uncle.
Now serving number 27.
But
listen.
It's true that you need a long list of people who can be your support system. And like we said at the very beginning, therapy, man, 100%. About it, so that you're not putting these burdens on other people. But you're right. If you can get to at least through the muck down to like the core root of the problem, then it's an easy fix. You get feedback from whoever you're talking to, and they can help, even if it's just for them to like sort of tell you, yeah, that makes sense what you're feeling. Be like a voice of support.
I got one last question.
Well, but I have more questions.
My question's on behalf of Tasha, and again, you could probably dig down in why I give a shit. But I see Tasha as an introvert who masks herself well, disguises herself as an extrovert. I see her coming home exhausted from dealing with people and traffic, and it's LA. It's ugh. But I also see her kind of being like a highly sensitive person. What does she, and again, I know I'm doing her therapy for her, and I know that's probably the horrible thing to do, but what does she need to just let go of society, of the Instagram, and did this photo get enough likes, and how can somebody just stop giving two shits and just release that expectation? I feel like women have this expectation put on them, and again, I'm cut me off whenever you're ready. But I feel like when you, as the oldest sibling, was just says that even yesterday in the car ride home, says that her mom didn't come to enough dance recitals, and because we were talking about like having pitching a TV show where you get a do-over. So she said she never got any video from when she was in show choir, which is like dancing and singing. And I was like, you need a do-over. You need to go out there, redo it, and get your mom to go videotape that. But like, how do you overcome that feeling of that you were never enough, and also that feeling that you're just okay
you
with who you are?
50,000 questions and he doesn't know where to start.
I can find a thread. So
fix her.
The first thing I always recommend to men, if they don't know, is to ask, what can I do for you? What can I provide? How can I make this the most pleasurable? Baths, scents, foot massages, just
we got to go. We're out of time.
It's been amazing. Make a ritual out of it and ask, and then play and improve and try. She's on her journey. She's creating her world. It's chauvinistic to try to change her directory. Even her driving herself crazy, men tried or fix it. Back to John Gray, men from Mars, women from Venus. Guys are fix it. We're trying to fix it for women, and women don't want that. They want you to be their partner and to be available. They want your presence. They want your attention. They want your curiosity. They definitely want your humor. And so the best thing to do is okay, how can we create a game of this? How much pleasure can we do in the first 15 minutes of you being home? Is that a sexual thing? Is that a foot massage? Is that,
I say sexual.
But sometimes that can be pressure for a woman. That's
I understand.
Right.
Yeah.
So you can have her lay down, and then you can put your fingers on the back of her head, and just, there's so many things to do, but your attention and your intention to have her feel pleasure will have her go from her masculine of being out in the world, go, into her feminine, energetic
and
body.
This is like superior man shit, right?
This is such winning advice right now. I hope you all are taking notes. This is such winning advice. It's just tiny ways to support somebody. And yes, let a woman flow back into her feminine. I find that's one of the hardest things to balance because I do feel like such a boss. I'm a proud feminist. I'm out here stomping the pavement every day. But sometimes I don't want to be the boss.
Right.
Sometimes I don't want to have to take care of everything. Sometimes I don't want to have to micromanage. I don't want to have to do the emotional labor. I don't want to have to tell you what to do. I just want to sit back and be the queen.
But that's what you get. That's
day.
what you get with the podcast. You're involved with nothing on the backside of it. You know what I mean? You get to just show up and be cute and turn your live stream on, and you tell me. But what we've learned is she doesn't want to have to manage me with emotional labor around the house. So I say let's walk around the house and take a look together, because sometimes she sees shit that I just don't see. I should just But I wanted to say this: is it the women? Part of the feminist movement is taking on these new roles that I believe in some ways you're just not genetically meant to do. So women are becoming more masculine in their energy. So you're saying that that's okay? She just needs to learn how to shift back to that when the work's done.
There's so much force in there. You're trying to solve a masculine to a feminine with a masculine problem. Just I gotta fix this. There's an allowing, there's just a softness. There's a paying attention.
And life is an ebb and flow.
Right.
There's no way. I mean, you are not just masculine energy. You have a very strong feminine energy. You have a very strong feminine existence. And I'm not telling you to go back in your box. It's an ebb and flow. We just have to learn how to manage being one thing at work and being another thing at home, or whatever it is.
I'll say this as we wrap up, because we got to go. And again, we probably could have asked you questions for 20 hours. I know some listeners probably have to pop an Adderall to get through this, but there's so much in there. We naturally, when we started dating, were so bad at team building activities. We still struggle with that. We fought over how to tie a surfboard to a roof, put a tent up. I mean, that was the worst. So many things. That 4 years ago, we decided to make soap, which is like a chemical equation. You got a lot of shit can go wrong. It's dangerous. And we've figured out a way to communicate together, knowing how difficult it was, because we did fight making soap. We fought over how to cut it, what essential oils to use, this and that. Anyway, we finally learned how to make soap. So we wanted to give you some as our parting gift. So this is some soap for you and your significant other that we've made. That's it's organic coconut oil, and I think that's both. I think both of those are peppermint. But
beautiful.
Let me see.
Yeah. So enjoy some of our soap as a product as the one thing we've decided we can do together. Yeah, it's peppermint, and then I think the other one.
These
might
are
be
different bars. I don't know what that other bar is.
Yeah,
on
you
the
can't
bottom.
tell what the
Maybe
bag-
lavender.
We'll smell it and I'll let you know.
Yeah.
But they're really good there. So
They're beautiful. Thank you.
And you have a book coming out?
I do have a book coming out December 6th. It's called
Right around the corner.
Oh, that's
Yes.
perfect, actually, because we were gonna upload this we're a few weeks ahead. So so for people listening, can they pre-order it?
Yes.
Or
So the book is called UnHidden, a book for men and those confused by them. It's a pragmatic guide for everyone to get along and move from antagonistic to collaborative. Comes out December 6th. You can pre-order at robertkandell.com. I'm also doing a 12-hour telethon a Jerry Lewis telethon via Facebook on the 6th. So
Oh my gosh, so
we'll
cool.
have to definitely
maybe you
watch
guys
that.
will come on and do a 20-minute slot with
Oh,
us.
That would
yeah.
be amazing.
Yeah, you can do it you can come to Santa Monica if you want, or you can come.
Oh, absolutely.
on Zoom. Yeah, come
Yeah.
on by.
Yeah, that would be really fun. Absolutely. We'll count us in for that. That would be great.
Wonderful.
And thanks again so much for being on the podcast. We've you really did hit on a lot of questions that we've had, and of course it comes down. We don't necessarily have answers so much as a giant workbook of shit we need to do. You know what I mean?
Well, enjoy the questions. That's the masculine communicates to produce, to move the box from point A to point B. The feminine communicates for intimacy and connection. How do you feel moving the box? And it's the marriage of the two. That's where the most power is. So enjoy the questions. It'll have you grow as a man, have you grow as a woman, and have you grow as a couple if you stay in the inquiry and the curiosity.
Oh, yeah.
What a beautiful way to
absolutely.
end. Thanks so much for being on the podcast today.
My pleasure. Thank you.
All right, bye everybody.
Take care. Bye.
Thank you.
SAP, baby. Yeah.